How's it going?
So good to see you. So how did you end up at Reddit? How does one even, do you just like, you're in the subreddit so deep and then like all of a sudden somebody reaches out to you and they're like, you want to work with us?
Yeah. Basically, but yeah, you guys are really in for a hard context switch, huh? From futures to Reddit. Reddit's a ton of fun. I actually started off working in counter-terror policy a long time ago. And from there, I got pulled into a friend who started a small startup because I was sick and tired of doing policy work. He started off this company called Quixie, and then I helped them start their BD team, though I had absolutely no idea what business development meant or what tech was about. So it was a super fun journey. Learned a lot about technology. From there, I went out and started the business development team for another startup who ended up building an insights company who sold data to hedge funds and such. And from there, Reddit reached out, and that started my journey here.
Here you are. So for those who don't know, I mean, Reddit is I think it's the 8th biggest site in the world, 5th biggest in the US, right? So tiny little startup. So what's the life like at Reddit? Like San Francisco office, amazing campus. Like what do you do on a daily basis?
Reddit's a ton of fun. So for those of you who want to make the trip up to San Francisco and check it out, feel free and reach out. My email is noam.cadouri@reddit.com, and then you can check out the office yourself. Always happy to have guests over. So the office is a ton of fun. We've got roughly 400 people at the office, and it's basically a really solid crew of passionate, smart, like really brilliant people. The energy there, I think, is really something else that I haven't really seen in some of the other places I've worked at. So it's a ton of fun.
Yeah. What's your favorite subreddit? If you had to pick one, only one.
So right now, 2 of my coworkers just had kids. So I troll them with gifs from children falling over. It's a community with like millions of people with just pictures of kids and gifs and they're falling over. It's amazing.
That's like, how does it even come to be? Like, I mean, you guys see the entire life cycle of each subreddit, right? Like, so does the subreddit start as just one person posting like millions and millions of images and then eventually becomes like a worldwide phenomenon? Like, I never really know, like, how does the birth of a subreddit really begin?
So before we go into that, I'm guessing there are probably a couple of people in the crowd at least who are not super familiar with what Reddit is.
Yeah, sure.
So Reddit, we're a big site. We've got about 350 million monthly active users. So we're big. We've got about 175,000 active communities. So basically, we've got a bunch of people. They create pseudonymous accounts. So you can call yourself. You can create a username that is the same as your real name, or you can call yourself like Orange U12345 or whatever. And then rather than having your friends and your family follow you or you following them, because you have the pseudonymous identity, you subscribe to communities you care about and you're passionate about. And in some cases, you might not necessarily be super open about affiliating yourself with your public identity. So you've got this wealth of communities, 175,000 of them. You can subscribe to everything from subreddits that have to do with cooking, GIFs like RA. I don't know if you guys are into that. Like 13 million people join this community, and it's basically a community that's a competition of cute pictures. Like if you want to kill time, it's amazing. But then there are also like serious subreddits that are very deep within one genre. So as an example, finance is a huge sector on Reddit. We've got roughly 20 million users who subscribe to a whole host of subreddits. It's similar to like a chat room. And there are rules that govern the content that you produce. So you have an account, you follow the stuff you like, you contribute in communities you care about, and basically anyone can create a community. It's super fun.
And how has the finance community grown over time, right? I mean, it started as like a very small channel, but like I've been on the crypto channels on Reddit. They're insane. Wall Street Bets is obviously like one of those infamous ones,
it's
right?
Huge, yeah. So how do they start? You basically say, hey, I've got an idea for a topic that doesn't exist, or I want to put some spin on it, and you come up with the idea. You just create the create subreddit sign, and you put up your rules. So in some cases, you're like, I'm early in investing and I have these like fun, unique ideas. And here's my philosophy. And you come in and you share all that. You create the rules. You create the structure for it. Other people who like that type of thinking, they subscribe to the subreddit as well. And from there, you get like a collection of people who are talking about, that theme. Yeah.
And so switching gears, so you work in the BD group. What is the data business inside of Reddit? How did that even come to be? Obviously, we both have data business that we met out in Colorado. What's that business like, and where does it sit in the portfolio of Reddit businesses?
Sure. So data is this wonderful term that I think every company has some sort of data play. And ours is basically we take all the content, the comments and posts that happen on the site, and we make available a feed. So if you want, a fire hose of that data, you can come. You could pay for it.
How many posts a day? Like, do you know?
Oh, like a ton. Yeah. I mean, how many posts do 330 million people create? There's a lot of chatter. And what we found is that there's like, I think Chris Moody, I don't know how familiar you are with Twitter, but he had this beautiful saying that I think resonates still today. And it was that, social data unlocks, near limitless use cases and value. And that definitely resonates. You've got a whole gamut of businesses who basically take this data and they make use of it in some way. So the data business at Reddit kind of started off with two hypotheses, right? So one is if you're an advertiser, right, and you want to make ad investment decisions, you use a set of tools that help you figure out where on the internet you should buy ads, right? Because ads is kind of like investing. You want to make sure that you're getting a return on your ad spend. So one of the things that we were trying to figure out is like, how do we get advertisers to think about Reddit as a place for ad serving? And if you want your platform to be recognized as a place, you better be in those tools. So that was the sort of hypothesis. We did some diligence in the space. We found some really exciting partners who do really exciting analysis for marketers and budget owners. And we gave them access to our pipelines. And that enabled them to monitor our site for subreddits that are interesting for the brand. So as an example, Charles Schwab recently did this like really cool panel of our users, and they found out communities that really care about investing and have an affinity for the brand. And they released this like Q&A style ad where people could engage with the ad. They could write their little responses in the post, and you had this like awesome discussion going on in the comments. And this whole type of advertising exchange was enabled via our data platform. So one, like get data into the hands of business decision owners and the advertising space, and two, see if there are other really interesting verticals for us to participate in, such as finance. And we're definitely excited to be here and talk about that with you today.
Yeah. No, and in terms of the applications for the more financial side of things, I mean, I think it's probably early days, but what are you guys seeing in terms of, the usage of that? Are they pulling down the whole thing and, using it for market sentiment or activity or anything like that? Or it's just very exploratory?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, we've got 330 million users. That's basically, all of America, right? So our audience, 50% in the US, 50% international, but basically you have a huge swath of the US population talking about literally everything. And they're having these discussions across, 150,000 communities. And that means that if you're good at listening for signal, you can uncover some really, really interesting stuff. So as an example, because there's so many communities, there's a community for literally everything. Even within the automotive sector, as an example, right, there are people who are really passionate about cars, and there are people who are really passionate about like one brand, like Volkswagen. Right. And then you can have people who are really into like tweaking their cars, and they put them on dynos, and they do all this, these modifications to their car, and they track everything. So in some cases, we find that there's valuable signal amongst this discussion. So an example of something like what kind of I'm alluding to is in some cases you might have like 5 or 10 or so people who make modifications to their car, who track everything, and they might see, hey, look, the specs of my car aren't necessarily performing to what the factory's reporting. And then because there's a community of like 1,000, 5,000 people who do this, when one person posts something like this, you might have like 5 or 6 or other people who are, fiercely like in that realm of modification, and they could validate the claim. They could say, yeah, I've got the same model car, I've got the same equipment. Let me run it through my stuff and see if I'm running into the same issue. So in some cases, you might be able to see the conversation that our community has and find and uncover a really powerful signal that couldn't be indicative of a manufacturer over-reporting the performance of their emissions, as an example. So these are all things that we're looking at, and this is a category of deal work that we're definitely in exploratory phases on. But we're here because we're eager to work with everyone here and to see if there's value in unlocking the data in the finance sector.
Yeah, and I think that what I always position Reddit is when it comes to research and stuff like that is, everything breaks on Twitter, right? Twitter still has a hold of that initial announcement. And then it really seems like people that actually want to investigate that further, they end up on Reddit. Like, I think that in a lot of cases, I've, gone down some path of research and all of a sudden I'm on this like subreddit talking about like, I don't know, insane like conspiracy theories and all sorts of stuff. So do you guys like have to differentiate yourself against Twitter, or is it just kind of like running in parallel? I mean, very different product, very different world, but I mean, how do you guys think about yourselves in the ecosystem of social?
Oh, yeah. So Reddit is kind of unique. So part of what we talked about earlier, this whole concept of pseudonymity, like that doesn't really exist in major social platforms today. Like, in the more popular ones, you've got your personal identity, and we think that part of the freedoms that come with engaging on our platform are attributed to the fact that you can just speak your mind, your friends and family, in-laws, so on, aren't following what you're writing.
Right. So it's totally unbiased by personal opinion because you just devoid of it.
Exactly. And then the other thing that's really fun about it is, unlike some of the other social media platforms, there's no like character cap. So if you want to like write up a semi-dissertation on whatever it is that your curiosity is pulling you towards, you can't. Like, there's no character limit. There's no inhibitor in terms of people reviewing your content. We really think that it's enabled the site to be a sort of like home of communities and belonging on the internet, which we think is like a really fun and powerful thing.
And so you've been there 3 years, 4 years, 3 years?
Yeah, 3 years, yeah.
3 years. How has it changed since you've been there? I mean, I assume that growth is growth, but what's the focus in terms of what are you guys working on? I mean, what's your day-to-day?
So I joined, and we were about a 50-person office in San Francisco. So we were a pretty lean machine.
Which is think about the 8th biggest site in the world, run by 50 people.
Yeah, it was super fun. There was more work than we ever thought we could overcome, but we did it. And then we as the company matured and we grew and we continued to grow both in headcount and in user base, it kind of freed us up to look at the market, see if there are opportunities to be, opportunistic or come up with some exploratory business cases, and really staff a team of experts who are super passionate both about, business and also about the product. And I think that's really enabled us to, something like triple revenue and grow our user base from what was like 180 million monthlies to like 330. So it's the headcount driver, the culture, you're dealing with a lot of energy. It's just a ton of fun.
Yeah. And politics, right? I think politics is one of the big things that we didn't touch on too, but in the finance category, politics is also super important. So one of the, big categories on Reddit is politics. What do you guys see in terms of just, there's like real-time reporters, there's, a ton of research being done around the space. Is that being used on the data side as well, or is that kind of outside the scope of possibility?
Oh, no. So the way that we started our data program is, we want to keep it narrow and focused, because I think when you have something as broad as data, right? there was a time where everybody would say they've got a big data team, and I think it would like drive everybody in the data space crazy because it's a meaningless word. So we have a lot of platform data that we distributed to the market, but we were very deliberate with who we gave access to. So the first batch of users were news sourcing tools. And to give you an example of what that is, as the journalism sector and publishing is being squeezed and there are a lot of financial pressures being applied to that sector, you have things like writing quotas being implemented across newsrooms. You have this phenomenon where investigative reporting is becoming more of a legacy style. And it's in one hand, it's unfortunate. On the other hand, it creates this environment where writers have a strong dependencies on tools to inform them on what to write about. And we kind of saw this and said, okay, well, we should have Reddit content be feeding into these tools so that writers will source stories on Reddit and then reference it as they're writing these articles around. So that was one kind of vertical that we chose to be deliberate about engaging in. And then the other vertical is this ads business that we touched on briefly. But yeah, we're constantly looking at new areas to expand our data distribution. So far, politics hasn't been an area that we've been particularly keen to jump in on, but we're certainly excited about all the other market potentials.
And what kind of drives you besides data, right? I mean, what is it about Reddit? I mean, are you on the Reddits yourself, or are you just kind of an observer? So on StockTwits, we have, of course, the lurker phenomenon, which is so many people that are just constantly watching. But are you an active contributor? Do you sit on the sidelines?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, so I'm a mutt, right? Like my personal background, I'm like part Iraqi, part Polish, part Czech, part Israeli, born in the U.S. So like every grandparent's from a different country. Every generation's from a different country. Like my great grandparents are from India, my dad's side, right? So it's like everybody's from everywhere. And it's interesting because as a human, I was just like genuinely curious about my family origin. And in some cases, I don't have relatives who are around who can share about what that was like. So my earlier days on Reddit were about exploring like food passions in Iraq, as an example, 30 years ago. And that's what kind of like brought me to the site. So I found my niche in, history and cuisine and different regions of the world. And from there, that opened me up to like politics and cat gifs and all the other like wonderful aspects of Reddit that exist.
Got it. Okay, one more. Do we have, if you want questions from the audience, you'd talk to Noam off or on stage. I think in terms of last questions that I had, I mean, where are we today versus, going forward a couple of years? I mean, what do you envision kind of the data program, but also kind of the team overall at Reddit, end of year, next year, into the future?
Yeah, so Reddit's a pretty small company, even though we like 8x'd since I joined 3 years ago. In terms of headcount, we're still.
You say 8x? 8.
8. Yeah. We were 50, now we're roughly 400. We're still, a much smaller firm than some of the other social sites like Twitter, Facebook, etc., who staff in the thousands. So, I think there's a lot of room for growth and continued dedicated attention to verticals. So, if you're looking down the line, you could see more attention focused just on finance as an example, or just on community engagement, at least as it relates to the data world. I also do some fun stuff on revenue and on ads. So, as our ads platform continues to mature, get to see some more fun ads and revenue initiatives being launched by our program. So super excited about the future of Reddit. And if you want to talk to me about data access, want to check out the San Francisco office, if you're from that area, again, it's just Noam.Cadouri, spelled exactly how it appears over there at reddit.com.
Did we spell it right?
Yeah. You nailed the spelling that I gave you. Yeah, that's good. Copy and paste works well.
Anybody? One question? Otherwise, we'll turn it over to Ian. He'll keep us going to the next one. Thank you, Noam.